refugees, immigrants, the homeless, we have seen in the last 48 hours in the United States the Pope advocating for all of those groups here, and that is just part of the sting for one group of victims, survivors really, who say the Pope, known for helping the underdog, has overlooked them. I'm talking about survivors of sex abuse by priests, and many are angered after hearing Pope Francis say this to 300 American bishops. Translated from Spanish, the Pope said, quote, "I know," I have a quote for you, "I know how much the wounds of these last years have weighed on your spirit, and I have supported your generous commitment to bring healing to victims in the knowledge that in healing we too are healed, and to work to ensure that such crimes will never be repeated." So joining me now, two women who survived childhood priest abuse. Barbara Blaine, founder of the Survivors Network of Abuse by Priests, known as SNAP, which now has 9,000 members in 60 chapters nationwide, and Joelle Kasich, who is also a SNAP member. So ladies, thank you so much for being with me here. And just first to you, if you can just tell me briefly part of your stories.
Well, the priest in my parish started abusing me in the summer between 7th and 8th grade, and I thought it was all my fault, and I never told anyone until I was well into adulthood. And then when I did tell, I told my parents, and my dad said we had to report it to the bishop. So we did. My dad didn't say we should report it to the police. So the bottom line is that he was permitted to remain in ministry, and the church officials convinced my parents and I that we should not go to the police, and that it would be better for me not to. And so we didn't. And then it took 7 years before they finally removed him from ministry, and I eventually learned that he had done it to so many other girls, and they knew he had done it to the other girls, but they didn't warn my parents or do anything to protect me. And that's the really, I mean, I can't reclaim my childhood, but I sure like to ensure that it doesn't happen to others.
So that's how you feel in your story as well, with what happened to you.
Between the ages of 15 and 17, I was sexually molested by a choir teacher at my Catholic high school. And by the end of the 2 years, I was pregnant and had a sexually transmitted disease. But the worst part was that school officials knew about the abuse and did nothing to stop it. And they knew he was abusing other girls and did nothing to stop it. And like many survivors from very conservative Catholic backgrounds, everyone blamed me. They said I must have done something and that I was at fault. So in 2003, I was able to use California's civil window to civilly sue the Diocese of Orange in California, where I was abused in the high school and the perpetrator. And at the end, when I settled, I got more than 200 pages of secret documents, including a signed confession from my perpetrator, signed confessions from school officials. They knew this guy was abusing people, and they quietly let him move on where he can hurt other kids.
I'm looking at you and I'm hearing your stories and I'm seeing you as adults, but you brought your pictures just so we can grab a two-shot, Alan, just so we can see what you looked like in your younger years when this was happening. And so now that we have the Pope here and put them down, when the Pope addressed the bishops, he seemed to almost relate, let me just quote him again, acknowledging the challenges they face, the temptation they may have to, quote, lick one's wounds, to think back to bygone times. And when you heard that, Barbara?
Well, it was really, really disappointing. I mean, it felt like a slap in the face.
Why?
Because the bishops have treated the victims horribly, and they have allowed our perpetrators to remain in ministry where they could and usually did abuse more children. So the very men who enabled our perpetrators and who caused the devastation of so many lives are being praised by Pope Francis. I think that word courage should be held for victims, that it should not be used for
bishops in that congregation. Here's the just gentle pushback on that as I read more about this Pope, and I want you to respond to this, Joelle. The argument can be made that he's taken more concrete steps, okay? For example, he's created a court system within the Vatican to remove bishops, which has actually led to the resignation of 2 American bishops whose dioceses have been implicated in the clergy abuse scandal. One, he has set up a council of abuse victims headed by Boston Cardinal Sean Patrick O'Malley. And finally,
he's expected to meet with sex abuse victims when he travels to Philadelphia at the end of his tour. So, given those,
Well, and let's can we go back to
Sure.
because let's look at when you talked about the trials. The Vatican Tribunal is a very secret trial, and the only bishop who was scheduled to go into that was a Polish archbishop who died before the proceedings could get underway.
Just
The
2 months ago.
Yes, the resignations of the Archbishop from St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Kansas City, St. Joseph has had to do with survivors coming forward and exposing crimes. That had nothing to do with the Vatican. In fact, Robert Finn from Kansas City, St. Joseph, was convicted of child endangerment for covering up for a priest who was creating child pornography. The Pope let him stay in his job for 2 years afterward, and he only resigned a few months ago.
what do you want? I mean, you've experienced this, you're well read, you know all the facts, the details, this is like part of your life now. If you had the Pope, we know the Pope is expected to speak with some survivors. If he were to come to you and speak, what one thing would you say to him?
Well, I think what we want is we want the Pope to protect the children. So we want him to turn over the records that he has about sex crimes and criminals to police, and we want him to demand that all the bishops across the world do the same thing, and we want him to punish the bishops who have concealed and covered up the crimes. I mean, let's be realistic. When he says that, I mean, like the commission and the group that he's setting up, which hasn't been set up yet, to the tribunal to investigate the Pope, the bishops, that in one sense is almost like it's almost deceitful. It gives an impression that if he just had a little more information, then he would do the right thing.
I understand.
Yeah, the largest collection of evidence about child sex crimes, even those going on right now, is in the walls of the Vatican. And that was put together in 2001 by now Pope Emeritus Benedict. They have the files. They have every case of child sexual abuse comes to them. They can open those up, they can help put bishops in jail, and they can adhere to the law.
Joelle and Barbara, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got to go now to the